Are you looking to deal some damage with your Kuki Shinobu? And no, I'm not talking about the green number Hyperbloom stuff. I'm talking about pure, shocking Electro damage. Yes, the purple numbers. Well, boy, do I have the guide for you. Wait a minute, what? No? You wanna play Hyperbloom? You're telling me people actually play that shit? Well, too bad. The video has already been made and you're watching it. So let's talk about how to make our masked midriff waifu deal some damage. Before we begin, I just want to give a quick shout out to Rocky Dayo. She's the lead theory crafter of Shinobu mains, and she works with Kaching mains, Wangsheng Funeral Parlor, and Kusanali mains. Look, I'm not a theory crafter, and I don't do any of that way too dank Genshin math stuff, so Rocky is the one providing all the data I needed for this video to help me make an in-depth, well-informed guide. Without her huge contribution, this video wouldn't be possible. She is also currently writing a Kuki Shinobu guide for Kaching mains and Kusanali mains, so be sure to check it out. Alright, guide time. The reason I chose to make an Electro DPS Shinobu guide is because I want more people to know about another way to play Shinobu other than Hyperbloom, which also takes advantage of the new Dendro reactions. And also because other people have made videos about Hyperbloom Shinobu and I need some content. To be fair, Hyperbloom is way cheaper to gear and there's less stuff to worry about. Just go full EM, no crit, no ER requirements, no brain. Anyway, it goes without saying, but an Electro DPS Shinobu build is going to make use of the Aggravate reaction. If you don't know how Aggravate works, check out my video explaining Aggravate. This video will make a lot more sense after that. Overall, Shinobu's kit doesn't deal much damage, but one thing we do know is that she applies Electro quite frequently, making her a pretty solid candidate for Aggravate. We'll start by talking about the talents. Talents are pretty straightforward. Don't level any. In all seriousness, talent leveling isn't necessary for this build, since Aggravate damage doesn't scale with talent levels at all. You can level her talents if you just really like her. If you value healing more, you can prioritize her skill, but in terms of damage, leveling her talents will only make a really small difference. Before we talk about what weapons are good with her, a few things to keep in mind. Base attack and attack percent are not important at all for her. Her burst scales off HP, and her skill doesn't deal enough raw damage to justify running attack on her. The stats you'd want from a weapon are ER for burst uptime, and crit, damage percent, and EM to increase her damage. That said, the Primordial Jade Cutter is her best in slot. That big dick crit rate really makes building crit ratios so much easier. Her best free-to-play option is the Festering Desire, which surprisingly isn't really far behind the PJC. Its energy recharge substat helps to fulfill Shinobu's energy requirement, and the passive gives crit rate and damage percent to her elemental skill, which makes up about half of her damage. Alright, next up we have Fav. Favonia Sword is a decent choice to help with energy issues because of its high ER and particle generating passive, and the low base attack doesn't bother Shinobu. Fav's high ER allows her to run in EM stands, but in terms of damage, Festering still has a much better passive. Freedom Thorn is best in slot for more team damage because of its passive buffing teammates. I'll give an honorable mention to Iron Sting for being a solid free-to-play option for those who missed out on Festering Desire due to its EM substat and some bonus damage from the passive. Another honorable mention is the Mist Splitter. Though its high base attack and low crit damage don't help much and the damage percent buff accessible to Shinobu is really small, I give it extra style points. Moving on to artifacts, as always you want to prioritize stats over set bonuses. You want crit for the circlet and electro damage for the goblet. For the sands, it's going to depend on your weapon and substats, but generally if you have a weapon with an ER substat, go with an EM stance to improve aggravate damage, but otherwise you'll need an ER stance to help Shinobu reach her energy requirement. Both ER and EM are of the rarer main stats on the sands, so if you can't get one yet, you can temporarily use an HP percent sands for better healing, but you really want to switch to one of the other two once you get one. For artifact substats, you want to first prioritize reaching the ER requirement, then go for crit stats, then EM, then HP percent if you need some more healing. With Shinobu's 60 cost burst, ideally you'd want to go for around 170 to 180% energy recharge because she doesn't generate many particles throughout her skill duration, and on top of that, she'll be off the field most of the time, reducing the amount of energy she can get from particles. This ER assumes you're running her with Fischl. You should be anyway. Who doesn't run Fischl on Electro teams these days? But if you're not, and you're instead downgrading Shinobu to a support for Sino or Kaching, how could you? The ER requirement gets bumped up to over 200% because they don't generate as many particles. For the crit ratio, we go with the usual, at least 50% crit rate to 100% crit damage. But let's be real here, you're never going to be satisfied with this ratio, so you'll go up from there. EM is here to increase the aggravate damage bonus, so you want around 200 to 500 EM on Shinobu. This is quite important because without that extra damage, she just hits like a wet noodle. HP percent substats here are only really needed for that extra healing because they contribute very little to her damage. Now, onto set bonuses. Assuming equal substats, meaning basically impossible, the 4-piece Thunder Soother is actually her best in slot. To keep the 4-piece effect active, you need to keep the Electro Aura on your enemies, which means your Electro application needs to outpace your Dendro application. But that shouldn't be a problem if you're running a double Electro team, as you should be, and if you're running an Anemo Swirler in your 4th slot, all the Electro swirling is going to cover that 100% in AoE situations. Coming in at a very close second, we have the 4-piece Gilded Dreams for its considerable Elemental Mastery buff. 4-piece Emblem and 4-piece Thundering Fury are decent, but they both fall behind a 2-piece combination of Thundering Fury in an EM set. The 2-piece set effect of Noblesse is pretty alright, but it's a smaller buff compared to the others. Keep in mind that most of these sets have less than 5% difference in damage between each other, so just go with the pieces that have the best stats. For Constellations aren't necessary but do help increase your DPS. If you want to go for Constellations, she's on the current banner, so you can go for it if you're not avoiding the featured 5 stars. Her C1 increases her burst AoE by 50%, which extends its range, a nice addition when enemies are harder to group up. Her C2 extends her skill by 3 seconds, adding 1 instance of Electro application, so 1 extra Aggravate. Her C3 and C5 increase talent levels, but as mentioned before, her talent levels aren't important. C4 adds 3 special instances of Electro damage throughout her elemental skill duration. This damage is considered elemental skill damage, but has no ICD. If only another similar constellation had a separate ICD. It also generates particles, so overall this constellation gives a nice DPS increase. C2 and C4 each takes 10% off of her energy recharge requirements. The C6 is garbage. Strict condition, very small damage increase, and bad uptime. Don't even try to go for it. We're making an Aggravate team, so Dendro and Electro are required for Quicken. Anemo is important for swirls, and we want to avoid the other elements. And to patch up Shinobu's energy issues, we always want a second Electro character on the team. We'll use this team as a baseline with Fischl, Kale, and Kazuha as her teammates. A pretty standard team with a 15-second rotation. Fischl is here to help battery Shinobu and deal a lot of Aggravate damage. Kale is here for Dendro application, and Kazuha is great for crowd control and buffing Shinobu and Fischl's Electro damage, while also dealing lots of damage himself. Alternative teammates? Keqing can replace Fischl, giving this team an on-field carry with good Aggravate damage in AoE, but she will raise Shinobu's ER requirement. The Kunari can replace Kale, and he'll be the on-field carry for this team. You have the option to run 4-piece Deepwood Memories on Shinobu, and she'll take on more of a support role, so that Dikanari can run 4-piece Wanderers to maximize the team's Dendro damage. The Anemo and Dendro slots can be filled in by Sucrose and DMC respectively, but the 20-second burst cooldown can extend rotations, resulting in a considerable DPS loss. However, this isn't much of an issue if you have other characters with 20-second burst cooldown, such as Lisa, Miko, and Sino. Speaking of Sino, the effectiveness of slotting him in as the other Electro character for Shinobu still needs to be calculated. However, like Keqing, Shinobu will need higher ER. It should be noted that while Sino is constantly attacking during his long burst duration, Shinobu's healing does provide a good amount of comfort, and he can also benefit from the particles generated from her skill. Venti is an interesting pick for the Anemo slot. He is excellent for grouping up light enemies and refunding energy for Shinobu, lowering her ER requirement. Shinobu's burst can hit enemies in Venti's burst, but her skill can't, so unless you're interested in jumping every time her skill pulses, her damage output will be less than optimal. Before we start the showcase, I want to go over how this build is supposed to be played. Because Shinobu's Grass Ring heals the active character throughout its duration, we want Shinobu to stay off the field. It's important to keep Shinobu under half HP so that her burst will last longer, deal more damage, and proc more aggravates. And the extra healing is a nice little bonus for your other characters, so she'll be off the field most of the time and only swapping in to use her burst and recast her skill. It also should go without saying that you need to make sure the enemies have a Quicken aura before using Shinobu's burst, or you will lose a lot of damage. I'll be using the Sino team for the showcase. It's not the most optimal, but I like playing it, and it's the team I've had the most fun with. Besides, not using her on her best team and still doing well just goes to show how good she is, right? Right?
As one with wind and cloud. Into the wind.
Get with me! Lightning strike!
The wind knows me. Fallen leaves, adorn my night.
Midnight phantasmagoria! This way! Out of my way! My royal decree! Terrified!
Wind strike. Fallen leaves, adorn my...
Shadow Raven! What? Try this on your side! Our bond is strong! Out of my way!
Clouds high. Birds.
Oz, reveal thyself!
Shinobu obviously isn't the best electro damage dealer out there, but hey, this is still a solid playstyle, and in my opinion, also kind of fun. One thing I noticed is how this build isn't affected by the typically lower scalings of 4-star characters because Aggravate only scales off of character level and EM, and it's not like 4-star characters have lower level caps. Wait, let's not give whoever's any ideas. Anyway, try out this build, let me know what you think in the comments, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you the next time I decide to upload a video again. But before that, you can follow me on Twitch to hang out with me live. And thanks for watching.